All right, hello everyone. Welcome and thank you for attending today's presentation on Black IO Psychology, New Directions in Science and Practice. My name is Clemente Diaz. I'm the Associate Director of College Now at Baruch, and I'm also an adjunct faculty member in Industrial Organizational Psychology. We're very excited to have all of you joining us today, as well as our guest speakers, which are Macy Cheeks and Shavonne Holman. They're the co-founders of Blacks in IO, and they'll be talking a little bit about what the field of IO psychology is, as well as what they're doing in Blacks in IO. So being mindful of everyone's time, we want to get started promptly, but a few things. Please keep your microphones on mute, and please hold off on asking questions until the Q&A portions of the presentation. There are going to be two sections in which we're going to have Q&A, so it's going to be right after kind of an overview of IO psychology, and then again towards the end of the presentation. If you have any pressing questions, you feel free to put those in the chat box, and myself or my colleague Robinson will respond. But again, we ask that you kindly hold off until the Q&A portion of the presentation. So thank you, and then without further ado, I'll turn it over to Macy and Shavonne.
Yes, thank you, Clemente, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. You could have been anywhere in the world on any other Zoom call, but you are here with us today investing in your education and knowledge as we chat about industrial organizational psychology. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. We're going to give you an overview of IO psychology, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about a group that we created, a nonprofit called Blacks in IO, where you can learn even more about IO psychology and get involved. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce myself briefly. My name is Macy Cheeks. I am an IO psychologist practitioner working in consulting. So I work with a bunch of different organizations, and I do affirmative action planning, where I look into organizations and I really help them understand if they are discriminating against women or minorities throughout their practices. I went to Howard University for undergrad. I studied psychology. And then for my grad school education, I went to a very small school in Kansas called Emporia State, where I obtained my master's in industrial organizational psychology. I currently live in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I will turn it over to my partner, Shavonne, to introduce herself.
Hey everyone, thanks Macy for that warm introduction. My name is Shavonne Holman. I am also the co-founder of Blacks in IO Psychology. And again, as Macy said, we are so glad to have you all here. A little bit about myself. I am a recruitment and examination manager for the Department of Juvenile Services. And there I do recruitment strategies as well as assessment development for the agency. I also attended Howard University for my undergraduate studies, and I attended the University of Maryland, Baltimore County for graduate school, where I also obtained my master's in professional studies in industrial organizational psychology. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, so I am so glad that we're working with Baruch College. I am very familiar with the college, and I'm so excited to have, folks who are in New York really being exposed to the field of IO psychology. So hopefully you all learn a lot about this industry, and we have, some Baruch graduates, joining this industry and being, real successful in the field. So thank you all again for being here. And now we'll talk a little bit more about what this presentation will entail. So we'll talk about, the history of IO psychology very briefly. We'll talk a little bit more about what it means to be a scientist in IO psychology versus being a practitioner. We'll also talk about the different career trajectories you can go depending on if you have educational career and master's or if you go with a PhD. We'll talk about, some IO projects or some areas that you might explore in the workplace if you become an IO psychologist, some problems that you might solve in your organizations. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about job and salaries, because that's important, right? Like what jobs you can have, how much money you can make in the field of IO psychology. And then something that you all can consider right now, classes that you can take that'll help you towards a field, a degree in IO psychology. We'll talk about some of those classes that you can consider. And then we'll talk about our organization, Blacks in IO, and how you can get involved if it's of interest to you. So before we get started, I just wanted to take a quick poll. I know you all have your computers muted, but I want to hear from you all. Does anyone know what IO psychology is? And we won't take too much time on this because I'm going to tell you, but I just wanted to know if there was anyone that was familiar with IO psychology, heard about it before, and wanted to share what they've heard. Anybody? Don't be shy.
I see Paul, maybe last name Paul or first name Paul, raised their hand.
That's me.
Hey.
Hey.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
So what I know about IO psychology is that it's a kind of like a self-field of psychology that implies like psychological theories, principles, and research findings in industrial and organized settings.
Pretty good. That's pretty good. You can take over the presentation. You pretty much know. That was great. That was great. Anyone else? All right, well, we won't take up too much time, but yes, that was great, and thank you for sharing. So as you can see here, industrial organizational psychology is the scientific study of human behavior in organizations and the workplace. So different than the regular psychology field, where that's the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. IO psychology specifically focuses on individual, group, as well as organizational behavior and how this knowledge applies to the workforce. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in different areas, but generally it's really just the study of behavior and mental processes.
And
so,
jump in real quick, Shavonne, because I heard this way of describing IO psychology recently, and I think it helps in folks who are just new to this concept, right? When you think about a psychologist, you think about, going into an office, maybe sitting on a couch and, talking to someone, getting therapy. Maybe that psychologist is helping you through your problems, right? Your own personal individual problems. Well, IO psychologists, if you think about it, we still have a couch, but we sit a business on our couch, right? And they tell us their issues with people. They tell us their goals with their employees. And then as industrial organizational psychologists, we try to help them through, those issues or meet their goals.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to use that. Yeah, we sit the organization on the couch. That's good. So thanks, Macy, for that. So moving right along, we wanted to give you a little background history on the field of IO psychology, and not really talk too much about this, but I did want to highlight a few important dates that really helped mold the field of IO psychology. And so as you can see here, I just want to say before we start, wars made a tremendous impact on the field and the growth of IO psychology. And we highlighted here in 1917, where the military really had an influx of recruits, and they didn't really know how to place them, right? And so this is where we saw our first signs of selection and hiring, right? World War I came about, there was an influx of military recruits, and they needed to figure out where they were going to fit within the military. And so they developed a test to really assess their intelligence level to determine where or what occupation they would have in the military during World War I. So again, that was our first signs of like selection and assessment for organizational psychology. And then moving right along, we also wanted to highlight in 1924, this is where we saw our first signs of employee job performance, right? It's known as the Hawthorne study, which was a collaborative study between Western Electric Company and a group of researchers from Harvard University. And this study was done to really investigate the impact that working conditions had on the way employees performed on the job, right? And so whether that was the lighting in the room or the temperature of the room, if they changed those working conditions, would the employees perform better on the job? And what they found in this study is that regardless of the working conditions, the employees still performed better. And that was essentially because they were being watched, or they were being viewed, or they were being valued. And so although this study didn't, find a significant correlation between working conditions and job performance, what they did find was that employees who were being valued in the workplace performed better. So that was our first signs of employee job performance. And then lastly, just to talk about history, in 1941, again with another war, World War II, this was our first signs of diversity and inclusion. There was another draft. A lot of the men were being drafted into the military. And so during World War II, they needed to find women to fill positions in the factories and other workforces where they were losing the men to the military. And so this is where we saw our first signs of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, because now they had to get women into these workforces. And so these individual occurrences really shaped the growth of organizational psychology over the years. And so here what we have is the areas of concentration for IO psychologists. IO psychologists really address issues ranging from recruitment and selection, as we talked about, to training and development, performance management, workplace motivation and how we can continue to motivate employees, quality of work life, diversity and inclusion. So there's a wide range of areas to study or to work within an organization. And we put it on this line so that you can see the difference between the industrial versus the organizational side of the field. So on the left side of this numbered line, or this line, if you will, you'll see it says industrial. And so industrial types of positions usually study the individual or the job, right? And so they're concerned with how someone or how an employee can effectively perform a job, or how someone can, what skills, what knowledge, what abilities do they have to be successful at a specific job. That's going to be the industrial side of things. Whereas on the organizational side, this is where IO psychologists are really assessing how an organization functions as a whole, and how employees function within the organization. And so again, we'll talk about diversity and inclusion, and how we can include or be more inclusive in an organization so that it's successful, how we can ensure that the organization is developing and really being successful, and then how employees are how they are being successful within the organization. So that's really the difference between the two. And sometimes you'll find that these roles will overlap, right? So you can have someone who does selection and placement as well as diversity and inclusion. And I think that's the beauty of IO psychology, right? Like, you can really decide which route you want to go in with the field. And if you find that you have, interest in performance management as well as diversity and inclusion, you can pretty much find a job that caters to that type of work. And so IO psychology is a great career for you to, with a wide range of possibilities to work within. So now we'll talk a little bit about the researcher versus the practitioner. So as I said, IO psychology has a wide range of areas to work within. And what we did was kind of break up those categories here on this pie chart. And so you'll see that the majority of IO psychologists typically work in university. And those are individuals who have an interest in research. They always wanted to be in academia, so they'll serve as like a college professor. They wanted to do research and help with the theoretical approaches to IO psychology. So that's going to be in a university setting. And sometimes you'll see those in independent practices as well. those jobs will require you to have a PhD. You'll hear a lot about practitioners. Macy and myself are practitioners in that we have a master's degree and our work is considered more applied, right? We're in different organizations, really applying the knowledge that we learn help our organization. So we're not really involved in the research and the theory. We're applying the theory, that research, to really make a change in these organizations. So you'll see that in different consulting firms. Some people might have their own practices as well. So you'll see that in private and government-based jobs. So it really just depends on where your niche is and what you want to do. If you find that you're someone, you want to be in academia or you want to be a professor, then the researcher side is going to be more tailored to you. But if you find that you want to be hands-on, you think that you want to be a consultant working day-to-day with companies and individuals, then the practitioner route might be best for you.
All right, so I can jump in here, Shavonne, and start to check out some of the IO projects, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All righty, so we just listed out 3 sample projects that an IO psychologist can work on a day-to-day basis at work. And this will really give you just a little bit of insight into what we do every day and some of the projects that you could possibly expect if you take this route. So remember how I said, a company can come and they can sit on your couch and then you help them with their problems. So this first problem that a company found was, they want to know if men are making more money than women in their organization, right? That's really important to know. And so they're going to come to an IO psychologist, a team of IO psychologists, and you would have to figure out, okay, how are we going to help them understand? Well, in our toolbox as IO psychologists, we have something called compensation analysis. We use statistical tests, and that's something that you will learn through your graduate school career, and even in undergrad, if you're taking some advanced math courses, you learn how to run statistical tests. And using those statistical tests and being able to interpret the results of them, you can help the organization understand different disparities in pay. And once you see the disparities, the differences in pay between men and women, say men are being paid more than women, doing the same job, then you can come in and you can create, say, a bonus criteria or some type of criteria or program so that you can correct those differences. That's something that IO psychologists would do from start to end, and we would probably bring in folks from human resources, like the folks who work in compensation, to really help us in that. Bring in those experts, but IO psychologists would have their hand in that process from beginning to end. The second project here is a question that an organization may ask: is our application process discriminating against women? So as a IO psychologist, in our toolbox, we have something called a step analysis, and we would use a statistical test to look into each step of the application process to see where women may be discriminated against. So say if we are, there's 3 steps to an interview process. You come in, maybe you get a phone call first after you submit your application, and then after that phone call, you get a in-person interview, and then after that in-person interview, you have to take a test. Well, we would come in and we would analyze each of those steps of the application process to see where women may be dropping off at a higher rate than men. So they're not passing the in-person interview. Why is that? And we would look at the job descriptions. We would make sure the job descriptions are solid. We would work possibly on creating structured interview questions so that everyone is getting the same and fair interview. And then we would validate selection tests, right? So that third step that I said, we would go in, look at the tests that they're using and ensure that it's valid and it's really indicating what you would do on the job. So then the third one here on this slide is that our company has a problematic good old boys culture, help. And so if you don't know what good old boys culture is, it's basically just an old school culture, kind of stuck in the past. And this company sits down on our couch and they say, we really want to change our culture. Well, IO psychologists, we might do something called mediation. We do focus groups where we get your employees in a room together without the managers and without the CEO, and we would sit down with the employees and really talk to them and get to the root of some of the issues. We might do an organizational redesign where we completely redesign the organization. Maybe we change how managers manage. We'll change some of the steps within the organization. Maybe, you know, they have a manager and assistant manager, and now we just make it so there's just one manager. There's not as many steps to get to the higher level. And then we would roll out a change management oversight. So we would help the organization change their culture, and we would manage that entire process. All right, so those are some projects. We also really wanted to talk about the jobs and the salaries in IO because it is important. I know for some folks, just knowing how much you can make in a field really helps you understand if it's something that you want to go through grad school for, taking on that extra time. You want to make sure that when you get out, you're being well paid and you're actually doing something that you like and that you're excited about. So we just wanted to show a few jobs and salaries that we found online. These are currently jobs that are up online for IO psychologists. Some of these are jobs that you can get right out of school, and some of these are jobs where you would need a little bit of experience, say some internship experience, or maybe just a couple years with some type of entry-level job experience. So the first one we have here is with the Department of Homeland Security. There's a personnel research psychologist. That's a very common job title for IO psychologists within the government. And you see that salary ranges from $99 to $128 per year. You also see for Facebook, the people research scientist for people analytics. The minimum qualifications for that position is either a PhD or a master's degree with 2 years of experience, right? So if you think about experience working while you're in your master's, or even working while you're in undergrad, could easily get you to that 2 years, especially if you're working in an area that aligns with IO psychology. This next slide, we have the FBI. Has personnel research psychologist positions. You see those expected salaries there up to $148 a year. The required education there is a bachelor's in IO or any psychology related field. And then of course they prefer that you have a master's or a PhD in IO psychology. Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a large consulting firm. I know they have them in New York. They have them all over the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And they hire for industrial organizational psychologists as well. If you look down in the bottom left-hand corner, we put the nationwide average salary for IO psychologists. And I also put in the average for Alexandria, Virginia. That's where I live, but you can easily find where what the average is for your area. I know New York is up there with it bypasses the national average for sure. And then we also have the CIA who hires. So this one's actually a graduate studies program, a human resources analyst. So a lot of folks in IO will start out in HR. It's a great place to start. You really get to understand organizations and how they work, and then you can choose your specialty from there. So you can see the minimum qualifications to work for the CIA in this position is that you have to be enrolled in a graduate program full-time, and the first one is industrial and organizational psychology, the first example graduate program they have on that list. And then we'll keep going. Amazon jobs. So you see this one says research scientist. You'll always find these different titles when you're looking for IO jobs. Sometimes they'll say IO psychologist, but not always, right? So this one is a great example of that. It says research scientist for talent assessment. And here you need 3 years of relevant experience and a master's degree. And so as I'm just kind of going through this, the important thing really to note when you're deciding if you want to go into this field, looking into these types of jobs and looking at the job descriptions can really help you understand where you want to focus your time and effort in your undergrad and graduate level career, right? If you start to look through this Procter & Gamble selection and assessment analyst job description and you really like it, you might say, hey, you know, in undergrad, I want to make sure I really, you know, all of my research projects are kind of going to be focused towards selection and assessment. And it's going to start to really make you an expert in starting at a really early stage. And then so when you're going out and you're starting to apply to these internships and jobs, you kind of have that experience and that knowledge to back it up as well. So what I really liked about this P&G job description is that it says, are you passionate about applying your background in IO psychology to make practical impact on organizations? And I really think that's what IO is, right? You're making practical impacts, but the impacts are huge for these organizations. And as you see, lots of really well-known companies employ IO psychologists. So the opportunities are endless. All right. So classes to consider. As you are going through undergraduate, you're getting ready to go through undergraduate, or you're getting ready to go into grad school, you have to, and you want to be an IO psychologist, you're going to have to stop and think about what type of classes that you want to take, right? I know, you know, there are certain classes that you have to take, but as you're kind of understanding what your interests are, if they do lie in IO, these are going to be some classes that will really make you a standout, especially in undergrad when you're thinking about applying to graduate school. And even beyond that, you know, when you're in grad school, when you're starting to apply to jobs. So under psychology, there's psychological testing, general social psychology, experimental psychology, and computers in psychological research. Now, your school may not offer these classes. These are just some example titles of classes to look into, but the underlying piece here is really learning about psychological theory and how to run research studies in psychology. There's also intro to business. So like we said, IO, you're gonna be dealing with business, you're gonna be in businesses. So it's really important to understand just the business world. So taking some intro to business classes, you know, human resource management and organizational behavior if it's offered to you. Statistics are huge for IO psychology. Not all IOs use statistics, but it's a nice tool to have in your belt. So research methods and statistics is really important, and statistics, business, and economics is important as well. And then last is the research and applied. I'm just moving my computer so I can see the full thing. Yep, so research and applied, if you have a ability to do a capstone, right? And so to do some research early on as a student, definitely take that up. Independent research study and internship. If you're able to enroll in those types of classes to give you that hands-on experience, it'll be valuable.
All right, Macy, I'll jump in here because I'm sure everyone is just excited about IO psychology and they want to know what's next, like what can they do? So I'm here to tell you, if you're interested in the field of IO psychology, you know, it's something that you want to explore, we've outlined some steps that you can take to kind of prepare you for that direction. You know, Macy just talked about classes that you can consider. You should also look into graduate and undergraduate schools that have some kind of specialty or focus in the IO field. So as we stated here, there is a website known as SIOP, and that's the Society of Industrial Organizational Psychologists. And there you can search for IO psychology programs that exist, whether you're interested in getting a PhD or a PsyD or even a master's. It'll outline those different programs and the degrees that they're offering. You know, if you wanted to decide whether you want to do industrial focus or organizational focus, you know, at this point you should be kind of you know, wrapping your head around that and really trying to research different types of schools that exist that could cater to your interests. Also, you know, Blacks in IO, and we'll talk a little bit more about, you know, the initiatives that we offer, but just getting involved with Blacks in IO, you'll also have an opportunity to network and partner with folks who have attended undergraduate and graduate schools in IO psychology. And so networking can also give you that opportunity to really decide, you know, which IO programs you want to go to, and you know, help you determine whether or not you want to do a PhD route or a master's route. And then next here, consider a specialty, right? You know, we talked about reviewing different job descriptions and seeing the type of work that's involved in different IO psychology positions. So you should start to frame your mind around what your focus might be, right? If you want to pursue an IO psychology degree, really start to think about what the niche will be for you, right? Like, what expertise do you want to focus on? And then that'll help you decide, you know, what types of jobs you're interested in. And then of course, can help you decide if you want to do a PhD or a master's level. And then of course, preparing for college, right? So taking whatever test is required, if that's any kind of admittance test or GRE. What we're finding now though, is that a lot of programs are kind of getting away from the GRE and taking a more holistic approach to admitting graduate students. And what that essentially means is they look at the academic career of their candidates, right? And so they want to know if you've done volunteer work. They want to know what kind of internship opportunities you were a part of. And so they're kind of getting away from the standardized test and really want to see what type of person they're admitting and what type of, you know, interest and knowledge they're bringing into their program. So when you're considering a program, also look at that, you know, whether a GRE is required or are they requiring someone to have, you know, more holistic, you know, storyline, right? Where they have the education, but they also have the volunteer and internship experience as well. And then if the program does require a GRE, you know, definitely looking at what minimum scores are for admittance and, you know, the different requirements for getting into those different programs. And then lastly here, we have get reference letters, right? And so it's important for you to build relationships with individuals so that they can really speak highly to who you are as an individual and also as a student. And so it's important for you to build relationships with, you know, if you are involved in volunteer work, right? Build relationship with your supervisors or your internship coordinators. Or if you're in school and you are attending office hours, you know, building relationship with your career counselors or your instructors. That is going to help you when it comes time to getting in these undergraduate. You have someone who can really attest to who you are as a person. And again, going back to that, really they can outline, you know, and distinguish who you are and what you can bring to their program. So really keep that in mind as you're going through your program and really building those relationships and networking and really seeing who can help you and apps. So going on to the next, we'll talk a little bit about the master's career path versus the PhD career path. So as Macy and I told you earlier in the presentation, we both have master's degrees in IO psychology, and we are here to let you know that you can be successful in the field of IO psychology with a master's degree. And this is typically a 2-year program. It'll require you to complete a thesis, which is, a study that you do over the course of your graduate studies. You pick a topic and then you spend time researching and you will present on the topic of your choice, or a capstone presentation, which is more of an applied study. But essentially both are requirements to graduate from the program. Master's degrees can be either terminal or non-terminal, and what that essentially means is with a terminal degree, you cannot progress to a PhD level. So once you've obtained a terminal master's degree, if ever you decided that you wanted to get a PhD, you could not just finish off the remaining 2 out of the 4 years for a PhD. If your master's degree is terminal and you decide to go to a PhD, you would have to start from scratch and get the 4-year educational training for your PhD. So that's just something to consider also when you're looking at the different programs, whether or not it's a terminal or a non-terminal degree. Typically the starting salary or median salary for a professional with a master's degree in IO psychology is $60. $60,000. $60, I would not be in this field. $60,000, and that's just the starting salary. Median salary is around $90,000, but as Macy suggested earlier, it really depends on where you're located. Regionally, of course, with cost of living, that's going to fluctuate. So of course, in New York, your median salary is going to be a lot higher compared to a place where cost of living is not as expensive. So on the other side of this diagram, you'll see the PhD requirements. So that's a 4-year program, usually requires a research dissertation. Again, another research study that requires you to present at the conclusion of your studies as a requirement to graduate. Here, the starting median salary for a PhD professional is $85,000, and then the median salary is $120,000. So as you can expect, a PhD requires more training, and so they are considering them an expert or a doctor of the field. And so of course they're going to have a higher starting salary and median salary. But as you can see, whether you decide to be a master's or PhD level professional in the field of IO psychology, you can be successful. And so here are just some programs, and these are in our area. In the media area that we did some research on. And so DC has George Washington University. They have an IO program there. In Maryland, you have the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, where I attended. You also have the University of Maryland, College Park, and Towson University. In Pennsylvania, Penn State, Villanova, Carnegie Mellon, as well as Temple have IO programs. In Virginia, you have George Mason, Virginia Tech, and Radford University. And then in New York, you have Cornell, NYU, and Hofstra has a program. And I recently found out that Hofstra's program actually takes terminal master's degrees. So that was interesting to know that they have a program that will accept master's terminal degrees. So just some programs that you can look at if you're interested in pursuing a IO psychology field.
So now we can, we're gonna begin to transition into the second half of our presentation, but before that, we'd love to answer any questions that you all might have about IO psychology, the field, schooling, or getting started. And we can take about 5 minutes for questions before we jump on to the other half of our presentation.
I guess I'll ask a question on behalf of the students. What's the difference between IO psychology and, let's say, human resources management as a degree?
So I'll take that question. They typically overlap a lot, and we find that a lot of professionals in IO psychology kind of do dual roles. When you think of human resource management, and human resources is changing a lot, right, as we see it in workforces. You know, back in the day when we thought of human resources, we thought of benefits and who can help me, you know, with my salary. And now HR management is becoming more strategic and helping the organization, you know, become more successful in how they operate. And so you do find that IO psychologists and HR management employees overlap, or their roles overlap. But again, IO psychologists are taking a more psychological approach. So what we're doing is researching or taking theoretical practices on human behavior, right? And figuring out how that scientific knowledge can help an organization succeed. So whereas HR management is just going to be the strategic agents that are helping the organization flourish, IO psychologist is going to come in with the theoretical and scientific knowledge to kind of back up that, you know, I don't even know, I'm losing the word, but just to help resolve those issues in the workforce, IO psychologists are going to bring more of a psychological approach to that. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
All righty. Any other questions before we bounce?
I think there's some questions in the chat. I see one from Anna White. Is IO Psych also used in schools, or is that practitioner? Sorry, I'm confused on this. Okay, well, we don't want you to be confused. So, Anna, do you want to unmute and kind of talk a little bit more about your question? Are you asking, can an IO psychologist work in schools?
Yeah, I was wondering about that because I didn't know if IO psychologists were also working with kids hands-on, or if it was just for companies.
Yeah, so you're probably thinking of a school psychologist. So school psychologist is going to work with students. And so if you think about psychology, there's a lot of different areas. And so you have clinical psychology that's really studying like human behavior and, you know, as you said, working with children, you know, whether if they have mental health issues or things of that nature. That's going to be like a school psychologist. However, an IO psychologist can work within a school setting in that they are helping the school as an entity or as an organization be better, right? So they're probably not working with the students on an individual basis, but they might be working with the principal or, you know, whoever the superintendent is to make sure that that school is as successful as it can be. Does that make sense?
And just to piggyback off of that, so my background is in IO psychology as well, and the program I oversee focuses primarily on high school students. And Robinson, who's also on the call right now, he works in my department, and the program he oversees is specifically for middle school students, and he has an IO background. So it's just a matter of we're overseeing programmatic aspects of, you know, maybe working with kids or adolescents versus just the day-to-day individual interaction with them.
Nice. Thanks for that follow-up. I see a couple questions, a couple more questions in the chat that I think we can answer quickly. So Anila, sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, asks, can we choose whether or not we want to get a terminal, non-terminal degree? And absolutely, you can choose that. It depends on the program that you want to go to, right? So you would pick a school that allows you to get a terminal master's degree. Or a non-terminal, but knowing that you would have the option to either stop at the master's or keep going on to your PhD. So it depends on the school that you choose. And then 2, can we do a double major and combine IO psychology with a similar major? Well, in undergrad, not a lot of schools have IO psychology majors. So in undergrad, you would probably end up finding yourself, if your school does not have IO psychology as a major, you would probably want to major in psychology and minor in business. That's typically what most people do who are interested in IO psychology. If your school does have an IO psychology major, then absolutely you could major in IO psychology, and then you can combine that, say, with business. Maybe they have HR management or something that really that complements IO psychology well. And then the last one, will doing internships in college benefits you when applying to a master's program? Absolutely, 100%. If you can get in the door with the internship, that will put you at the top of the list for a master's program, because they really do want people who have that real life experience alongside the educational experience. Alrighty. So we can move on just to talk a little bit more about our nonprofit. So Shavonne, I'll let you start us off. And then...
Yeah, so thanks, Macy. So we'll just jump right in just for the sake of time. We wanted to, make you all familiar with our organization, what we have to offer. If you find that IO psychology is something that you are interested in, we want to make sure that you all are more prepared than we are. So I just want to set the scene for you so you can understand why our organization exists and how you can get involved if IO psychology is something that interests you. So Macy and I were classmates at Howard University. Yes, the alma mater of Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. Whoop, whoop, shout out to her. But prior to Vice President Harris being appointed, we've also been very proud to be graduates of Howard University. And why is that? Because the institution really prepared us for, further education, for life in general, to be great in whatever field that we decided to go into, right? So can you imagine obtaining a bachelor's degree from a school like Howard University, stumbling upon the field of IO psychology when you realized that you didn't want to do clinical psychology, getting accepted into an IO psychology program, but then feeling really unprepared and at a disadvantage when you were in your program because you didn't have that knowledge or exposure in undergraduate studies. I can remember being in my graduate studies when I attended UMBC and feeling like really frustrated because I didn't have the fundamental knowledge that my white counterparts had. And that's just from them receiving, whether it was an intro to IO psychology class in their undergraduate studies or just some other exposure to IO psychology field, they came really prepared to their graduate studies with, some knowledge on the field. Whereas me, I knew nothing about it. And that was just very frustrating because, again, we went to an esteemed school, Howard University, but had no idea that IO psychology exists. And I realized that I wasn't the only person who was frustrated about this or who had these unique experiences. Macy and I talk about it all the time, where she was in her program and had very similar situations. Macy, do you want to talk a little bit about your experiences?
Very quickly, I can just say that, I went to a small school in Kansas for my graduate degree. I was the only Black person in my class. I was also the only person who had to take extra undergrad classes. So I was in grad school, but they were making me take undergrad level classes because I didn't have the experience that they thought that I needed to be, fully admitted into the program. I had thesis advisors who didn't understand or know what white privilege was and things like that. So it just naturally, the going through these situations in the IO schooling, the part of my life, and knowing that Shavonne had similar experiences, caused both of us some real concern. I can pop on to the next slide. So, of course, like I said, Shavonne and I both had similar experiences. We reconnected at a conference for IO psychology in 2015. That conference also lacked representation. They didn't talk about any of the important social events that had been going on in that year. So if you think back to 2015, if you can remember then, I know some of you all might have been younger then, but there were a lot of social justice issues that year that we thought needed to be talked about at PSYOP, right? So Eric Garner and the I Can't Breathe movement, Tamir Rice, who was a Black child shot by a police officer for playing with a toy gun. And no one talked about it, right? So on top of lacking representation, being, you know, a very white conference, they also didn't hit on any of the important things that we thought they needed to talk about within IO. And so we finally got together and we had dinner and cocktails, and we decided that we needed to be the change we wanted to see.
Yeah, and as a result of that, Blacks in IO Psychology was created. We wanted to create a space for individuals who shared experiences like ours, who were frustrated about like not seeing any other Black individuals in the field of psychology. And so we created a LinkedIn group where we could all, you know, just share our experiences and come together. And that LinkedIn group really turned into a networking space where we were going out and having cocktails, and it just grew and grew, and then it really became a nonprofit organization this past October. So we're currently a nonprofit organization, and we're a professional networking and learning association for Black IO psychologists, practitioners, students, and allies. And here you'll see our mission is to uplift Black voices and experiences within IO psychology. And we do that through continued education, mentorship, networking, and awareness building. We have events and products that, you know, address the disparities that are unique to our community. And overall, we just want to leave a lasting impression on the field of IO psychology, hence why we do things like this to get our students involved and aware of the field of IO psychology. And so, you know, with our membership, we really wanted to come up with a motto that really explained what we were doing. And so opening doors that didn't exist and keeping them open for generations to come really outlined what we were trying to do. And all of our work is really surrounding that mission.
Right, so we can quickly go through some of our goals. And of course, you know, if you don't get a chance to ask a question that you may have at the end of this, feel free to send us an email. We are more than happy to jump on a call with you and talk to you more about IO psychology if you're interested. So our first goal is to foster a community of diverse IOs and practitioners. Like Shavonne and I said, we used to get together in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area before the pandemic. But after the pandemic, you know, we really realized that we had a better just hold on the IO industry by turning into a nationwide, worldwide IO group. We started putting out monthly newsletters. I think it says we have 1,399 subscribers, but I feel like we have more now. We send out these newsletters that have spotlight opportunities, job opportunities, different research and resources that you would find beneficial if you were interested in IO psychology. We also just launched a membership platform where you can join as a member, as a student, and you can be part of this group. You can learn about IO from other professionals. You can have a mentor who can help you along and say, applying for undergrad or applying for grad programs. So definitely look on our website to find out more about that.
Yep, so goal number 2, we wanted to increase awareness of the IO industry at educational institutions nationwide, specifically minority serving institutions. And so we started our outreach to HBCUs and MSIs and just different programs around the nation, right? And just the purpose of that was to bring awareness about the field, hence this presentation today, and really getting students really thinking about the field of IO psychology. We've done presentations at Howard University, and you know, we're continuing to do more presentations at schools just to get our students engaged and aware of the field of IO psychology. As we said, we have a student membership base, and students have the opportunity to volunteer for one of our committees, pushing our mission, vision, and goals forward. So this is a great opportunity for you to get hands-on experience. Remember, we were talking about that in the last presentation. Volunteering through Blacks in IO will give you that IO experience that you can add to your applications. It also gives you leadership experience. So you can serve as a committee lead where you'll manage volunteers and just help push our initiatives forward. We also serve as a support system to our students. So we've hosted several events where, students who are in different programs or interested in joining a program can jump on one of our platforms and ask questions to any members or any alumni regarding where they are in the process. We also have mentoring opportunities, paid and pro bono opportunities, as well as scholarship opportunities for IO psychologists or those who are interested in the field.
Yep. So our third goal is, of course, to increase the presence of African Americans in the IO industry. So in doing that, we release monthly spotlight members, and this might be of interest to you as students, right? If you see some of these spotlight members, read about what they're doing. We post up their biography so you can read about them, and you can see what they're doing within the field of IO psychology and really understand, like, hey, is this something that I want to do? You can see all of that on our website as well. We really believe that representation matters. Like Shavonne and I said, we did not have that representation when we were students. So we really want to make sure that minorities and even allies really see that this is a diverse, rich field of individuals who are committed to the betterment of organizations as a whole.
Yep. And our fourth goal here is build a pipeline of diverse and informed IOs. That's what we've been talking about for the entire presentation. We want to make sure that people are informed and aware of the field of IO psychology. And so we do that in several ways. Career development opportunities. We'll host resume review sessions or mock interviews for people interested in obtaining employment in IO psychology industries. We partner with leading organizations to offer career and internship opportunities to our members. And then we also host info sessions where individuals can talk to hiring managers directly and ask questions about the different types of positions that they offer. Here is just one of our members we wanted to spotlight. She recently got a job as a result of our IO Spotlight opportunity in our job board that we have. And so she was looking for a job. She went on our website and found this job, and she just loves it. So we just wanted to share that with you all. And so here's a quick snapshot of our job board. You can visit our website, go to our job board, and we will put part-time and full-time internship opportunities as well as full-time opportunities in the field of IO psychology or related field. And you can apply directly from our website.
Yep. And so here's just a quick brief overview of our community call series. These are calls that you can just sit in and listen to. We have experts come and we talk about all types of hot topics. The one right in the front is one of our biggest calls that we had addressing systemic issues in law enforcement. We had a great conversation from there, and from that, we were actually able to build out a committee, a law enforcement task force, who is looking at all types of different issues within the law enforcement workplaces, right? Because as you know, law enforcement agencies, fire departments, police departments, and things like that are workplaces as well and need IO psychologists. And so this is, I think, our second to last goal. We're almost there. Of course, promoting a nationwide understanding of the unique experiences that African Americans face and serve as a vehicle to enable those conversations and evidence-based solutions. This is a law enforcement task force that I just commented on. They do a lot of really cool papers, things called white papers, where they get to write their opinions and share it with the IO community, which is really nice. It kind of solidifies them as experts in that area as well. And then, of course, we really do want to recognize the importance of allyship. Without allyship, we wouldn't be here talking with you all today. We know that our allies are important, and we celebrate our allies. We like to provide resources for our allies too. So if you are an ally to the Black community and you want to be part of this type of organization, feel free to reach out.
Yep. And so our last goal is to empower and equip our members with the tools, language, and resources needed to address the disparities unique to minorities. And so what we do is we hold one-on-one sessions with members. They can schedule a time to speak with anyone in Black IO leadership to discuss the situations that they're having, and we'll provide resources and advice as we see fit to help them resolve their problems. We also have open forum sessions, whether that's on LinkedIn, in our group, Facebook group, or even on Clubhouse, where people will pose questions and spark discussion to kind of help people, navigate through their unique experiences that they're facing. And so speaking of our different platforms, if you want to stay in touch or if you want to get involved with Blacks in IO Psychology, you can join our email listserv where you'll receive monthly updates on, what Blacks in IO has going on, any opportunities that are available. You can also visit our website at blacksiniopsych.com where you can learn about the work we're doing. And if you're interested in joining a committee, you can apply to be a part of a committee there. And, here's just some other ways to participate and stay in touch. Instagram, we have a LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as Clubhouse, and you can follow us at Blacks in IO on all of those platforms. And so hopefully, you all got some great information about IO psychology, and, it might have sparked some interest in getting more involved in the field. If you want to learn more, or if you have any further questions, again, feel free to contact us. If you want to be a part of Blacks in IO Psychology, feel free to contact us. Thank you all for listening. This is a great start for you all, as you figure out where you want to go in life. And hopefully, you can consider IO psychology as your career endeavors. And so now we'll open it up for any last questions, whether it's pertaining to IO psychology field or Blacks in IO Psychology, the organization specifically. We know we're up on time. So again, thank you all. Thanks, Baruch, and all the leadership for having us. So we'll open it up. And Macy, did you want to say anything closing before we open up?
You handle it, Shavonne. Thanks for joining, and I really hope that this sparks something in you all today. We're more than happy to chat more one-on-one if you need to, so just reach
out. And while you all are just thinking about your questions, I just want to give you all kudos. When Clemente told us that you all were high school students, we were very impressed to see that you all are taking time out of your days to really listen to these presentations. That just shows that you're really invested in your future. And so kudos to you all. If you all decide to go in IO psychology or in another direction, we just hope and pray that you all are successful. And this is a great start. Because you're investing in your future. You're taking the time out to really understand, what your interests are and researching different opportunities. And so this is just a great start. So kudos to you all.
Well, it doesn't seem like we have any questions. So I want to thank both of you for speaking to our students today, and any student who joined the presentation who's not a College Now student. One thing that I definitely want to mention is whether you want to pursue IO psychology as a career or not, it's still something you may want to consider taking a class on or learning a little bit more about, because at the end of the day, you're going to go into the workforce, regardless of what that is, whether it's in psychology, medicine, health, whatever the discipline. And that's going to involve understanding how the workplace works. And at the end of the day, that's what IO psychology does. We study the workplace. So why not get a kind of a leg up on your first internship, your first job, your work experiences, by understanding what organizations do and how they manage their employees and their workplaces. But again, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I know the students appreciate it. I'm seeing all the comments on the chat box basically saying thank you.
If you had a minute, could I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I was wondering, you didn't really, I don't think I caught whether or not you addressed, how do you pay for graduate school? Do you pay the same amount if you get a terminal master's degree versus if you go for your PhD? I mean, how do you budget, or what kind of student loan debt should you expect if you went for these advanced degrees? And thank you, I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thanks. Yeah, so with my limited knowledge on paying for programs, I know me specifically, there was a cost associated, but there are opportunities that can, waive those. So like when I was in school, I served as a graduate assistant, and that helped pay for my graduate studies. As long as I worked for the institution, they helped pay for my classes. And I know with PhD programs, typically there's fellowships and things of that nature. So when you decide where you want to study or what you want to study and they accept you, I know they have fellowship opportunities that'll help monetarily support your studies. But I'm sure there are other scholarship opportunities. In fact, Blacks in IO, we're in the process of initiating a scholarship opportunity for graduate students who are interested in the IO psychology field. So.
Yeah, and if I could just chime in and say the cost of the program depends on the program, right? It depends on where it's at. A lot of times if the school is private or public and different things like that. So there's no just one shot answer there, but I would also like to say that I too had a graduate assistantship that paid for a majority of my graduate school costs to get my master's. I had to take out student loans for the rest. Couldn't tell you how much those are. I didn't even look at it, but I did have to take out student loans to supplement. So that's just a realistic view.
I think ultimately it's a matter of opportunities exist. Students just have to seek them out. Because similar to your point, I also had a graduate assistantship. It actually paid my entire master's degree. So I know those opportunities exist. It's just a matter of seeking them out ultimately.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, well, thank you very much, everyone. Again, we want to be mindful of your time. We'll be following up with an email with the recording of this presentation as well as some additional information. So again, thank you very much. We hope that you enjoyed the presentation and take care.